What is up, guys? Richard Cackington III here, and today we are going to be discussing the latest kerfuffle within the Destiny 2 community. A lot of people are pretty darn upset about the recently unveiled raid gear for the upcoming Shadowkeep expansion. Now, if you're like, what the heck is this guy talking about? What raid gear? I did do a video yesterday covering a bunch of news and information coming out of the PAX event for Destiny 2. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's linked up above. That'll catch you up to speed. But essentially, the raid gear, well, it looks like this. And as you can see, if we look at the weapons, they look pretty sweet. I mean, no problems there, pretty unique. And then, actually, an exotic weapon, the exotic raid weapon, was unveiled as well. It's an exotic trace rifle. A continued fire weakens enemies and disrupts them. That sounds very unique, potentially very powerful, especially if the disruption can, like, cancel enemy attacks and stuff like that. So what's the issue here? Well, it has to do if we look beyond the weapons and start to look at the armor, because people started to notice some similarities between this new quote-unquote raid armor and an old Eververse set from Curse of Osiris. And due to this, a lot of people voiced their displeasure. There was like a top voted Reddit post made saying that we shouldn't accept reskins as raid loot. The raid is the absolute most pinnacle endgame hardest activity within the game. It should have its own totally unique looking loot. And we can see here one of the pictures used to compare these two sets of armor. If you do look closely, you can see some definite similarities. And in fact, when we look at the Titan Raid helmet back to back with that Eververse set, it's pretty clear it was a base reskin. However, looking at this image, I would also describe it as like a reskin plus. There was definitely some effort put in to make it look pretty different, but again, on the base level, the argument that it is somewhat of a reskin is kind of undeniable. Now, since that point, some sources have come out and said, hey, don't worry guys, this actually isn't the raid loot, but that was totally unfounded. Community manager DMG came forward and made a Reddit comment saying, yes, we can confirm that this is the raid loot. Now, people started to get a little bit more upset when they pointed out the fact that, okay, the raid armor, the new raid armor is a base reskin. That's one thing, but it's another thing when we have a very very unique looking set of armor that's already been revealed, and that's not the raid gear. And that's this set of armor here. This is Season of the Undying armor, and it hasn't been, I don't think, 100% confirmed where this comes from, but it's likely to be purchasable in some fashion from Eververse. Perhaps this is the armor that's available within that kind of Seasons Pass thing that was unveiled not too long ago. And in fact, we appear to have seen this armor way back in the day with the original Shadowkeep Vidoc kind of on a back monitor. You can see there's definitely some similarities. And on that back monitor, when people first saw it, they went, oh, Black Garden Raid, Vex, this is the raid armor, right? At some point in development, were these sets of armor originally intended to be the raid armor set, and then Bungie switched them into the Eververse store / battle pass? That is the narrative a lot of people are saying. And of course, that results in the argument that the coolest set of armor should be the raid gear, not the Eververse battle pass gear, right? So, that's where we are right now. That is the source and the outrage and the arguments and so on. So, what to make of this? Well, I gotta be honest with you guys, I am very surprised that people are getting this upset over the fact that a set of raid gear isn't unique, because raid gear hasn't been unique since Destiny 1. Seriously, aside from the Leviathan gear getting Ambitious Assassin as a perk, which I guess was unique to it, the raid gear has really nothing special about it aside from armor mods and then the exotics. Take a look at this. This is the Calicia Nobilis. This is a legendary scout rifle from the most recent Crown of Sorrows raid. This is a 150 rounds per minute archetype of scout, and these are the other 150 archetype scouts in Destiny 2. All of these same guns shoot exactly as fast, do the same damage, have nearly identical stats. Does the Noblest have any perks to offset it? Anything that only it can spawn with? No, not at all. Guys, this raid weapon is just a normal legendary scout rifle. Aside from its appearance, there's nothing that makes it unique. Take a gander back at what things used to be like with the Chaos Dogma from Wrath of the Machine. I think the Wrath loot was the absolute pinnacle, the best loot you could get from raids in terms of uniqueness. I mean, we have triple tap and then we have triple double. Triple double could only spawn on Wrath raid weapons, and if that wasn't enough, we have Whirlwind's Curse as an additional intrinsic unique perk for raid weapons. So this Chaos Dogma, it's doing things, it has effects that normal legendary weapons cannot get. It distinguishes it as a raid weapon. Heck, it's not the only thing. Take a look back at the original raid scout rifle from Vault of Glass, the Vision of Confluence. It doesn't have a unique perk per se, but it does have a unique intrinsic perk doing extra damage against oracles. Very useful if you are continuing to farm the Vault of Glass raid. This is the absolute minimum we got in Destiny 1, and we still don't have this in Destiny 2. The Fang of Ir-Yût from Crota's End, same thing, a unique perk doing extra damage against Hive Majors. Switch over to the Scout from King's Fall, and again we have that unique intrinsic perk, bonus damage against Taken. Actually very useful whether or not you're doing the raid. Obviously really good in the raid involving Taken, but outside of that and other activities it comes up as well. Heck, it wasn't even just the raid weapons. The Curse of Osiris weapons, as you can see from this scout rifle, had unique intrinsic perks too. The real issue with Destiny 2's raid loot isn't the fact that it's a base reskin. It's the fact that we've gone so far back from Destiny 1 and most raid loot offers nothing unique over its normal legendary counterparts, especially now that we have pinnacle weapons. Pinnacles are blowing raid loot out of the water. It's not even close. Now the counter argument is, well, if we introduce these things back into raid loot, wouldn't it be more powerful than every other legendary, and then raid loot is the only loot worth going after? Well, to be honest, a pinnacle activity loot should be the loot you want to go after, for one thing, but also, again, with some of those examples, like the Vision of Confluence. That's a very niche intrinsic perk that only matters if you're in that same raid. Again, that's the minimum. We don't even have that. Introducing that stuff back into the game, remember, armor as well used to have intrinsic perks that helped you within the raid too. That's been gone as well. Yes, mods make up for it, so I'm not going to be too much of a stickler about armor because you do have the raid unique mods, but there has definitely been a downfall, a step backwards from what things were in Destiny 1 in terms of raid uniqueness. However, while I do somewhat agree that, okay, maybe switch the sets, the one that's currently the Season of the Undying set, make that the raid gear, and then make this raid gear the Season of the Undying gear, that would definitely get people a little bit happier about the situation. I also feel, and I know I'm going to get some flack for this, that reskins aren't the worst thing in the world, especially when they do look like this different. If you saw someone standing with the old Eververse set from Curse of Osiris and then in the new raid set, like side by side, they would look pretty darn different. Again, you can tell it's a base reskin, but they've done a pretty good job at distinguishing it. And being a reskin, it means that you can save a lot of development time. But the thing is, you gotta be able to point at things you're doing because of this saved time. Yeah, it's a reskin, but the raid loot is more unique than ever. The raid loot has intrinsic perks and unique perks that no other guns have, like the Wrath of the Machine loot. And the thing is, if Bungie doesn't start doing that with Shadowkeep, if we just get glorified legendaries that just look slightly different and can't even spawn with unique perks compared to other legendaries, then there's nothing to point at for where the development time went for making it a reskin, right? Like, it's hard to defend it if the raid loot is this lackluster. However, I do want to say in Bungie's defense, because there's a lot of people really upset that the most unique gear is probably going to be, again, in that Battle Pass / Eververse. So like, oh, it's just about the money, but we want Bungie to make money, guys. We absolutely want Bungie to make a killing. Why? Because they're independent now. There's no Activision. It's just Bungie, and they are doing a great job making a game that we all love. Yes, this is an issue. It's somewhat annoying that the raid loot is apparently reskinned, but there could be much bigger issues within the game. Look at what they're doing in other games like Black Ops 4. They're absolutely nickel and diming all the players there by making the loot crates absolutely ridiculous in that game. So this, in the grand scheme of things, is a pretty minor issue, so you can't necessarily disparage them for putting a really cool, really desirable set of armor into the thing that's going to encourage people to actually spend money on the new content. That makes perfect sense to me. And so I would say cut Bungie a bit of slack here. They have proven themselves to not get overly greedy with these microtransactions. They may have been pushed a little too far in something like Curse of Osiris, where there was just so much stuff added to Eververse, but since then, it's been remarkably fair. The rate at which you get, engrams that give you cosmetics, the fact that you can shard them currently into Bright Dust, and coming up, there's going to be way more ways to get Bright Dust and all of that stuff. They have been very good with that kind of stuff, and so I don't think it's fair to disparage them and then suddenly call them greedy for putting a really cool armor set into the Seasons Pass thing. With that being said, I really also feel like this whole issue highlights the fact that the raid loot has been very underwhelming in Destiny 2, and I would hope that Bungie steps it up starting in Shadowkeep. And so guys, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickKackis. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.